I think that the really great teachers are showing you what you're going to do when you're not with them. Like, for instance, there was a pianist, a woman who I thought she was the bee's knees. I mean, I just was completely I idolized her, and I would go and bring her flowers after concerts and things like that. And she finally said, "Okay, let's talk." I was in my dorm at the Juilliard, and she called, and we had a 45-minute conversation. And I just kept on asking her, "Should I do this? What do you think about that?" And she was like, "You need to learn German. You need to study Schoenberg. You need to perform. You need to make money performing." Like, all these different things that she said to me were really great pieces of advice that I used for a long time. And even though she wasn't a mentor in the sense that I saw her all the time, that one conversation really opened a lot of doors for me in the way that I thought about my life.
Hi, and welcome to Artists Unveiled, a show where we bring on exceptional creators, not just to tell their stories, but to give you real insights into how they went from striving to thriving. My name is Holiday, and I am thrilled to introduce Simone Dinnerstein, a renowned classical pianist with 15 albums that have all topped the Billboard classical charts, and I can't wait for you to hear her story. So, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I had to listen to some of your playing. Some of my friends were very familiar with your work and fans.
Oh, nice.
I wasn't, and I'm sorry about that, but now I'm a fan. So
Oh, thank you.
now I know why. Now I know why things went to Billboard.
Thank you.
Yeah. But what's your first experience with an instrument, with a musical instrument?
Well, I wanted to play the piano when I was little, about 4 or 5 years old, but we didn't have a piano. We were living in Rome at the time, in Italy, and I heard the piano when I was taking ballet classes, and we had a real pianist who played in the class. And so instead of taking piano lessons, my parents got me recorder lessons. And actually, that was a great way to start playing music because I was taught by a professional recorder player who specialized in Renaissance music.
Oh, wow.
And so
Italian?
She was actually American living in Rome,
Okay,
but she
of
was
course.
a professional. I know. But my introduction to playing music was by playing Renaissance music, which I think was really a beautiful way to start.
Yeah. So when did you get indoctrinated into the piano?
So we returned to Brooklyn when I was 6.5 and found a local piano teacher, and my grandmother had a little spinet, a small upright piano that she lent to us. And I started taking lessons when I was 7. So that's how it started in Park Slope. Yeah.
And when did you have a sense that this had a more profound meaning to you?
Well, from the beginning, when I started playing piano, I absolutely loved it. Like, it was something that I was totally drawn to, the sound of it, and I just found it incredibly fun and wonderful. And when I was 9, I started taking lessons at the Manhattan School of Music Prep Division with Solomon Mikovsky, who was a college professor at Manhattan School of Music. He had a few kids that he taught, but I think I was the youngest one. And I think really it was from that point that I felt like this is what I want to do. And it sounds a little crazy now because when I meet 9-year-old kids, I think, I would never trust them to know what they want to do with their life. But I felt very strongly that this is who I was, that I was a pianist, and that's what I was going to do. And I was right. That was what I wanted to do.
I think that, I don't know how this happens, but when someone has some type of an unusual gift, they usually know. I
Maybe,
think so.
yes. Yeah, could be.
I don't think everyone always has the opportunity to go somewhere with it.
Yeah.
But I think there's something inside of you that you have something, there's something different about your experience with the instrument, or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you went to some interesting schools that are Juilliard. What was that experience like for you, and I think a lot of people who are talented would hope to go to that school. So what was that like for you?
Well, I mean, Juilliard is an exciting place to go to because it's so elite,
Yeah.
and it has so many incredibly talented students in it, and not just music, but dance and drama as well. I started going there. I was pretty young when I graduated high school, so I was 16 when I started going to Juilliard, and also because I grew up in New York City and Brooklyn, I really wanted to live outside of my parents' home, and at that
Perfect
time,
excuse.
at that time, Juilliard didn't have dorms. They put their students up at the West Side YMCA on 63rd Street, so that's where I lived that first year. And that was an interesting experience. It was actually quite hard.
I lived at the 92nd Street Y for a year. So
Oh,
I
92nd Street
understand the whole
Y,
experience,
yeah. I think that might have been a step up from the 63rd Street one. I don't know. But then the second year that I was at school, they built the dorm. So I was actually the first year of that dorm, which was amazing because it was
so special.
It was in Lincoln Center, and I was on the 26th floor with a view of Central Park. I mean, it was just incredible.
That's inspirational all by itself.
Yeah. So I think Juilliard was a very, very exciting. But for me, after the first 2 years of Juilliard, I actually dropped out of school to move to London to study with a piano teacher there, who I had met back when I was 15 in the summertime. I had started taking lessons with her, and her name was Maria Curcio. She's no longer alive, but Maria was an incredibly inspiring teacher and person to me. She had sort of been in her heyday during World War II. Like before then, like she was quite old when I studied with her, and she'd studied with a great pianist called Artists Unveiled, and she had a real following of students who came to London to study with her. She didn't teach at a school, and so for me, the kind of central learning experience as a young adult was to go to London and spend 3 years studying with her very intensively.
Sounds exceptional.
Yeah. And then after that, I came back and finished my degree at Juilliard. And then it was quite different going back after having had that experience in London.
Oh, it must have been completely different. I'm sure everything appeared different to you as well.
Yeah. Yes, it was. I had a lot more maturity.
Did you get opportunities to play in London when you were younger?
Yes, I did perform while I was there, and I played with other musicians, and I did solo recitals and some concertos, and I did some competitions. It was a very musically enriching time for me.
What do you feel that you've taken with you from those years?
I mean, I think that time, so I was 18 through 21 when I lived there. And also, I was living with my then boyfriend, who was British, and we got married while I was there. So it was a real time of development in every way for me. But it was a very difficult time because I was going through almost a kind of basic training with Maria. I mean, it was real boot camp with her, and it was
it's a whole world. So you're in different worlds at the same time.
Yes,
right?
And she was very, very tough, and her way of teaching was that she kind of broke your spirit and then rebuilt you. And because all I was doing was studying with her, I would have lessons twice a week that were 2 hours long. And the rest of the time I was practicing 7 hours a day. There was a lot of isolation and a lot of self-discipline. And I didn't have a lot of money. And so I was limited in many ways in what I could do. And I was also having to be having to have a real belief that I was going to be able to understand what she was teaching me and that I was going to grow in the way that I wanted to grow. But it was also, really tough. There were times when I thought I wasn't improving, or my playing was never going to be what I wanted it to be, or, how was I going to earn a living doing this? And it was, I think that the 20s, your 20s is a very difficult time. I would never want to go back and do that again.
Do you feel that when you're working with a teacher or a master teacher, they can be very intense? And do you feel that all of that is necessary?
I think it is necessary in at least in classical music, because there's such a high amount of technique needed to,
Yes.
which it doesn't just mean facility. I mean, it doesn't just mean having very strong fingers and being able to move your fingers, but also being able to understand a score, like a musical text, and being able to analyze it,
Right.
and
not just mathematically, but in terms of meaning.
In terms of how are you going to translate what you see there into sounds that are coming out that make cohesive sense, that are informed by understanding something about the style of the people that you're playing or the period of time that they were writing it in. I mean, there's a lot of different elements to it. So I think that you actually do have to be really exacting when you're teaching, and it's important to push the student, and the student needs to want to have as much information as possible. I think the thing that I feel differently about as a teacher now is that I was often taught by negative reinforcement. And I personally don't think that that's necessary. I think it's much better to have positive reinforcement. And I think a lot of people are crushed by that process. On the other hand, you don't want people to just think that everything's great. I mean, it's
a discipline.
It is a discipline, but I don't think that people need to be sort of beaten up into thinking that.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think it's important for artists, especially in this age of instant gratification, to understand that there's a process.
Yes. Well, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think that in the different artistic disciplines, it varies. So, for instance, I think that if you're a conceptual visual artist, that process is going to be vastly different than learning a Beethoven sonata.
Certainly.
So the amount of technique that's needed is different, or even the idea of technique is different.
Yes, absolutely. What do you feel was vastly different that you had imagined from your youth until now, in terms of what a career meant and what it meant to play an instrument and be a performer?
Well, when I was a child, I thought my idea of what it was to be a professional pianist was based on movies. Right. It was highly romanticized. And I thought that I was very idealistic. It was all about the music. It was all about being the best musician or pianist I could be. I think in reality, that's not always linked to success. And there are a lot of other skills involved in being an artist if you want to earn a living being an artist. I mean, it's one thing to sit in your room and make music and make it as beautiful as you can. That's something different than having to exist in a world where we have to, earn a living. And so there are, all sorts of other skills that I had no idea I would need when I was a kid. And I think that it would be a good idea, at least I think in music conservatories, for them to talk about that much more.
Broach it, perhaps.
Because it's not everybody is cut out for that.
It's true. I think in people who've had some success, there seems to be an organic marriage between those two things, though. The musicianship and the reality and the technical business acumen.
Yeah, and I think sometimes some people have more of one than the other, and sometimes things can seem unfair because you'll see somebody who has an imbalance. They're incredibly good at the social part of it, but maybe not as good at the interesting musical part of it. Or, there are all sorts of ways it can be. And some people have more of one skill than another. But I don't think. I honestly think that it doesn't matter. You could be like a genius. If you don't have some of the other stuff, you're just not going to have a career. Either you have to have it or somebody very close to you
That's trustworthy.
who's like guiding your whole life, which sometimes that happens. There are people
In rare
whose
instances.
parents take care of it or their spouse or whatever. But you need either to have that in yourself or you need an advocate very close to you who's going to have all those skills.
Is there anything that you wish you knew, your younger self knew? Or do you think maybe it all sort of worked out that you didn't know it?
I think that I sort of feel like I had a crazy path that I could never have predicted. One thing that I think about is that along my journey, what I've noticed, at least in sort of the business part of it, in terms of dealing with managers and presenters and all of the people that make the concerts happen. There's a whole industry of people in the recording world and the presenting world and the advertising world and the publicity world and journalism. All of those people, they all start off somewhere. And what I've seen over the years is that, you could be dealing with an intern and 10 years later, that intern is running a company.
Certainly.
And so I think that I didn't realize that when I was younger. And I thought there was a kind of hierarchy to how you even interact with people. And what I've learned is that every single person that you meet needs to be treated with the utmost respect because they are all growing and they're all changing and doing different things. And so, you might have had a bad experience with somebody when they were an intern, and then you have to deal with them when they're going to be in a position to hire you to play a concert.
Or vice versa.
And that can be very awkward.
True.
So I think that it's good to learn at a young age that you should just treat everyone as if, they could give you an opportunity someday, just the way that you might be able to give them an opportunity.
Do you remember any not too embarrassing learning moments about that?
I don't think I've had anything. I don't think I was ever terrible to anyone, but I think that I underestimated some people, and I wish I hadn't, and I just don't think it was right. And
things we don't know when we're younger.
We don't know that. Yeah, I've had experiences. I've had some embarrassing experiences as a teacher with like students where I was dismissive and I shouldn't have been dismissive with them. That kind of thing when I was really young.
Yeah, I had a learning experience. It was my Herbie Hancock moment. I was in. I got invited to a party on the Upper West Side. It was Lionel Richie's manager had just purchased an apartment, and my friend's brother was Roseanne Barr's manager. And so Jenny called me up, and she's like, "You want to go to a party?" So we go up to this. I'm a kid, and someone there is about to take some wine, and I cut right in front of them. And I was like, "Oh, who's this person?" And something just stopped me in my head, and I just was like, I heard a voice almost, you should never treat anyone that way.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, what I did. I said, "Sir, I'm so sorry. Here." And I gave him a cup of wine, and we're chatting, and his name was Herb, and it was great to meet him, and we're chatting. My friend Jen comes over to me a little later, and she goes, "Oh, my God, I got to introduce you. My brother's going to introduce us to Herbie Hancock." And I went, "Oh." And then I see Herb, but I didn't do the math yet. I'm like, Herb, come here. I want you to meet Jen. And that was my learning moment.
Okay,
so
yeah.
I know that had I made a different choice, I would have been incredibly embarrassed. But that happens in other ways.
Yeah, for sure.
So I saw a lot of Bach in Johann Sebastian Bach in your playing and in your choices. And how did Bach become an important composer for you?
Well, I think I always played music by Bach from when I was a little kid because every pianist learns his music. But it was really when I was a teenager that I became really obsessed with Bach. And that was mainly because of the pianist Glenn Gould, who became I became obsessed with his playing. And I would buy every recording I possibly could find of his. And I remember one time when I was about 15, there was a film festival at the Metropolitan Museum, and they had 2 days of films of Glenn Gould. And I went to all of them. Like I said, it was like 7 hours each day watching films of Glenn Gould. I mean, this is before YouTube and all of that, where you could watch anything you wanted to at home. And so I think that Glenn Gould was really the person who really got me into Bach. But also it was very intimidating to me because I felt that he had the final word about how Bach could sound. And I didn't think that I had anything to add to that, and so though I performed Bach, I certainly didn't feel that it was something that I had any kind of special insight into. And then in my early 20s, I heard a recording by a jazz pianist playing Bach. And that it was this guy, Jacques Lussier, a French jazz pianist. With his trio, he played the Goldberg Variations. And I was completely amazed by hearing him play this music because I never had thought about it sounding like that at all. Like,
how did he improvise it?
I mean, he was improvising on it, but his whole feeling of the rhythm of it was different, and the kind of breath in it, and just the imagination. It was very, very, very different than Glenn Gould. And I had heard, of course, I'd heard many different pianists play the Goldberg Variations by then, and I enjoyed their playing. But something about this recording was so different to me that I thought, it's so interesting that I respond to this, that I love this so much. And I started thinking about what was the music saying to me, as opposed to Glenn Gould, And I began to realize that actually the music was, for me, full of a lot of singing and breathing and speaking. And I didn't think about it as much as a digital experience of the keys going down on a piano. And when I started playing that way and starting to listen to the music in that way, suddenly it all started changing. And I realized that I had a very different feeling about the music than I had even known I did.
Did you feel like it was playing you, like pulling you to something? Or do you think it was coming from you, or it was like a dance between the two things?
It's hard to distinguish, but I think that the relationship between an interpreter and a musical score is so it's so complex, and we're so influenced by what we've heard, and it's so easy to imitate what we've heard. And if you try as much as possible to not think about what you've heard before, and instead to really look at the music and think, what is it about this music that's sort of strange and imaginative and interesting, then you can come to some very different conclusions. And I think that that's what happened with me with Bach, was that I started to think about, I find this part of it really interesting. I never heard that in the music before, and I want to hear that more. And when I did that, then my playing started to evolve. And
that happened at what point in your life?
It was like in my late 20s, I'd say, yeah. And for me, the real turning point was when I learned the Goldberg Variations, which was, I learned it when I was pregnant, and I was 29. And so from that point on, I really started to shift how I played Bach, and that made me shift how I played all the other composers too. It just made me feel like I should be more brave to think about what the music was saying to me as opposed to what I'd heard it being done before.
Do you do any composition?
No, and I'm not. I mean, when I was a kid, I liked composing, but that's not my thing.
I think you get a feel for what your thing is.
Yeah.
Right? And but you've worked with some interesting composers. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoy working with composers. There's one composer, Philip Lasser, he's a very good friend of mine. We've done a lot of projects together. He's written a piano concerto for me, and I've performed a lot of his music. And now he's been doing sorts of interesting recompositions of Bach for me. I also have been really fortunate to
So
work.
what's a recomposition?
Well, it's kind of hard to define, but like most recently, he took the very famous Air on the G string, which is one of the pieces that everybody knows by Bach. And I asked if he could take the underneath the music, usually there'd be a harpsichordist playing, doing a kind of improvisation based on a chord progression, and Bach writes the chord progression down using numerals that indicate what chords you should be using. And I asked Philip if he could write his own realization of that, but in his style. And so he follows the chord progression that Bach outlines, but it's a completely new piece of music that is very much Philip Lasser. And so I'm playing that while the strings are playing Bach's Air on the G string. So it's like two different pieces of music happening at the same time, almost like the piano is sort of nested inside the Bach. It's really, really beautiful.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah.
So I had an opportunity to listen to some of your music. I wanted to know a little bit more about you. And I noticed that, I might not have the technical terms, but I will tell you what I heard, if I might. There was a lightness to all of your playing, and it didn't seem to matter. And there was also a full-bodiedness at the same time. So there's a lightness, and there's a full-bodiedness, and then in between the notes, it wasn't something I could hear. It was sort of something that I could feel. I felt like a little twinkling between all the notes. And it was consistent through the different moods of music that you were playing, and these were disparate pieces, but I could hear it in all the playing.
That's very beautiful.
And I thought, that's why this person has had their work on the top of Billboard when they put out, 15 albums? In the classical, and there's something very cohesive in your work.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really touched. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, it's completely obvious. I didn't expect to hear that, right? I didn't know what I was going to hear. But can you be objective to yourself? Like, what do you hear when you listen to yourself?
Well, I do value very much touch and sound, like timbre. And in piano playing, we talk about touch, different pianists having different kinds of touch. I can hear, I can identify pianists that I love. If you were to play a recording of them, I would know it's them by their touch. And so that was something that was one of the things I was really working on in London, was to develop that. Though actually,
sort of like also a resonance between the notes based on how they're playing. Sort of?
Yeah, and how you it's actually literally how you touch the keys. The depth of touch, or which part of your finger you use, that kind of thing. I think I actually had my own sound from when I was very young, because I listened to recordings, cassette tapes from when I was 11. And it sounds like me. I mean, I could tell it's me. And that's kind of strange. But So when I listen to my recordings, I can hear my sound, and that is really important to me, that I can hear that, and that I know that it's what I wanted to have happen.
What do you think's generating that?
Well, it starts with how you hear it inside your head, how you envision it. And Maria used to have these two terms, the inner ear and the outer ear. And the inner ear is the part that imagines the music and the sound of it. The outer ear is the part that is listening while you're playing and making sure that that is actually being achieved. And to have a balance between those two is very hard. So yes, you have to envision what you want to have happen, but then you have to figure out how to make that happen. And that's a physical conundrum, like how are you going to use your body to do that? And that's changed for me over the years. So I think about those things a lot. Now I've been doing a lot of, I'm on the faculty of the Mannes School of Music, so I have heard a lot of piano students there. And I've been doing a fair amount of judging of piano competitions, so I get to hear young pianists on a very high level. And I don't think that as many of these young pianists are as interested in that aspect of playing. I think they're more interested in facility, which is speed and ease of
execution.
Yeah, it's literally facility to be able to play facilely,
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas touch and having an individual sound is something that is much rarer to hear. And I guess also that can be a divisive thing because some people will like your touch and other people won't like your touch. Whereas you can't really argue with if somebody's playing fast or not.
It's true.
But I think that individual kind of touch is what makes the music come alive. And when I hear somebody doing that, I find it really exciting. And when I don't hear it, I'm disappointed. So,
outside of your teacher from who you went to study with in England, were there any other mentors or teachers who were important to you?
Oh, yes. I had two other very important teachers. Growing up from 9 until I went to Juilliard, I studied with a fantastic man called Solomon Mikovsky, who was from Cuba. And he taught me at the Manhattan.
Colorful.
Yes, very colorful. And he taught me at the Manhattan School of Music at the pre-college. And he was.
I think Cuba incubates geniuses, by the way.
Yeah. And he brought me to Cuba, so I spent time in Cuba with him. But he was very much into being an individual, and he was very interested in the idiosyncrasies of different pianists. And he had this extensive LP collection. And when I was a kid, like 10 or 11, when I was playing a piece of music, studying a piece of music, we would then listen to 5 or 6 recordings of the same piece with different pianists playing it. We listened to it together and talk about everybody's interpretations, and that had a profound effect on me because it really, from a very young age, showed me that there are many, many different ways of thinking about something. And he himself liked pianists who were unusual and maybe a little odd, and so he loved having a singing sound. He taught me about how to make a singing sound from a very young age. Then the other teacher that I had after I studied with Maria, when I moved back and finished at Juilliard, I studied with Peter Serkin, who was a fabulous pianist who had a very, very active performing career, an international performing career. So he was the only one that I studied with who was an actual performer. And he was very eccentric himself. And he was very thoughtful. I mean, I'd play a piece of music and then there'd be silence for like a few minutes when I finished while he was just thinking about it. And then the lessons were kind of like us exploring the music together. It wasn't him telling me what to do, but it was trying to discover it together, which I thought was, I learned so much from that, from seeing how he was thinking about music and how did he approach the kind of detective work of trying to find the meaning in the music.
Having known a reasonable amount of people, I imagine, based on your experiences who are musicians, do you find that some of the people who are more masterful have anything in common?
Well, I think that the musicians who I admire are endlessly inquisitive. And there's no end to what they're going to discover. They're constantly exploring, and the ones that are less interesting have all the answers.
Could you put into words in a way that you think might be helpful from your experience how important it is for people to have proper mentorship? I think that's something that's a little bit missing these days. And I don't think that a lot of people understand the value of it.
Yeah, I think that, well, I'm not sure if mentorship and teaching
It's the
is the same.
thing.
Like, classical musicians, in my opinion, tend to study for too long. I actually ended my studies when I was 24. I didn't do a master's degree. I had enough. Like I felt like I'd studied enough.
It's almost a different branch when you get into, I think that it starts to become two different things. Are you going to perform and execute, or are you going to analyze and understand it from a more intellectual perspective? And I think that people sort of branch into directions.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I guess I was thinking of it more like wanting somebody to show you how to do something instead of trying to figure out how you're going to do it yourself.
Okay.
I think that the really great teachers are showing you what you're going to do when you're not with them.
Right.
And
like a great parent.
Yeah, yes, exactly, the same kind of thing. And I had experiences in my 20s with people that I admired, who I would try to, like for instance, there was a pianist, a woman who I thought she was the bee's knees. I mean, I just was completely, I idolized her, and I pursued her. And I would go and bring her flowers after concerts and things like that. And she finally said, "Okay, let's talk." And she called me. I was in my dorm at the Juilliard, and she called, and we had a 45-minute conversation. And that has lived with me for a long time because she gave me her time, and she said, "Just ask me all the questions you want to ask." And I just kept on asking her, "Should I do this? What do you think about that?" And she was like, "You need to learn German. You need to study Schoenberg. You need to perform. You need to make money performing." Like all these different things that she said to me were really great pieces of advice that I used for a long time. And even though she wasn't a mentor in the sense that I saw her all the time, that one conversation really opened a lot of doors for me in the way that I thought about my life. So, when a young person, I have a lot of young people who've approached me to ask for me to talk to them. And I always do it. I always do try to give them time. And I think that kind of give and take is important. But I think that ultimately you need to figure out how you're going to do it yourself. And I worry about people that are too needing to find affirmation or guidance all the time from other people. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the time that you have to let go of the towel and swim.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's actually when you learn to swim.
Definitely.
Yeah. Um, you're going to be doing some performances the rest of this year and also in 2026 with, is it Baroquelin?
Baroquelin, yeah.
Could you talk
Yes.
a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Baroquelin is a string ensemble that I formed a few years ago. It's 11 string players, and I lead them from the keyboard. And we've been primarily performing works of Bach, and the name is a pun because I'm from Brooklyn and we're playing Baroque music. But actually, this past year, for the first time, we did a program that was all Philip Glass, and we recorded that program, and that'll be coming out next summer. But our first album just came out last spring. It's called Complicité, and it's an all Bach album that would include some of Philip Lasser's recompositions, and it's a very, very special group of musicians. Like I hand-picked everybody in it, and they all are people that play a lot of chamber music, so they're highly collaborative musicians that are really thoughtful and really interesting. And though I'm directing it, so it's really my musical vision that's shaping the interpretation, they all are so much contributing to it, both in saying, if you want this to happen, then we could try doing it this way. Or they'll say, maybe we should try this kind of bowing. I don't know a lot about, I'm not a string player, so I've had to learn about what does it mean to have an up bow or a down bow. What kinds of things can you do as a string player that are musical to create an effect? Like I know it on the piano, but I've had to learn how to do that on a string instrument. And they've all really worked with me to show me how to do that. And so I learned so much from them, and they're just also really wonderful people to be with. And it's almost all women. Which I think is also kind of nice. The vibe is very, very
Was that just
supportive.
happenstance?
I think it's just because it may be just because I feel comfortable with women that I am drawn to playing with women. But and we are all like, one person will say, "Oh, my friend would be great for this," and then I meet them and it just has become this community of women. And oftentimes we have one man in there or maybe two, but it's just a very supportive vibe in the group. And the way that we form on the stage is that we take the lid off the piano entirely, so there's no lid on the piano. And I'm sitting with my back to the audience.
How does that affect things?
Well, it's acoustically it can affect it because, if you're sitting, the typical way to sit and when you're performing on piano is with my right side facing the audience, because the lid of the piano projects the sound out into the hall. That's what that does, that acoustical triangle. So if you take that off, you don't have it directly being projected in one way. But what I'm doing is I'm sitting with my back to the audience, and so the people can see my hands. And the reason for doing that is that then the 11 players are in a semicircle around the piano. And that way we can all see each other. They can see me because I'm conducting from the piano. And that was the typical way that things were done back in Bach's day with the harpsichord. He would have done that. And it just gives a much more communicative
Almost feels
dynamic.
a bit tribal.
It is. It's almost like some kind of rite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That goes back to something that I mention sometimes, which is that early performance, the precursor to performance was tribal shamanism, and that as
in a circle.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I know you probably come across a lot of people, so you have an opportunity, but What advice do you have when it comes to finding collaborators for someone else? What would you advise, or how do you know, how do you vibe out that you're going to be able to work with someone? What do you look for?
That's taken a lot of years of trial and error for me. I think that there are many factors to having a good collaboration, and it's not all somebody that you think is an amazing artist. Like, of course, you do need that. You do need to be if you don't genuinely value that person's artistic approach, then you should not get involved with them artistically. But also, they have to be people that have good communication skills. And I've had collaborations with people that find that challenging. And then that just makes the whole relationship really difficult, So either they have to be such a genius that you can put up with them not being able to communicate well, or they should be people that want to collaborate. And that means working with people that understand how to give and take. And I find that hard too, because I have very strong ideas about how I want to do things. And sometimes I find compromise really difficult. But the really great collaborations that I've had, the best ones, have been where I really felt stimulated by the person I'm collaborating with, and I felt like I'm learning from them and that I don't know as much as them. And
in their area.
And then they also feel that way about me. And we can sort of then find new ground together, which is really exciting.
You mentioned something about performance anxiety and the iPod.
Oh, yeah, the iPad. Yeah,
the iPad,
yeah. Yes, that's something which maybe is not translatable for every genre or form of art. But I guess in this way it is. In classical music, there's a performance tradition for pianists in particular that we play everything by memory. And that's hundreds of pages of music committed to memory. And while I've always been able to memorize, I've always had tremendous performance anxiety about forgetting in performance. And I've had some pretty horrendous experiences over the years having memory slips in performance. And when the iPad started to be used for music, I was kind of, at first, I thought that was odd, and I also thought that people would really judge me badly if I was playing with the music. And then finally, my performance anxiety was getting so bad that I thought, I'm actually going to have to quit being a performer because I couldn't take this feeling of the possibility of forgetting. And so I thought, well,
given the choice,
I'm either going to quit or I can try using an iPad. And so I decided to try the iPad, and it has completely transformed my performing life. I mean, it has been night and day. I mean, it's not that I don't have any more anxiety about performing. And actually, sometimes I still forget because I have the iPad there, but I'm playing by memory often the time. And sometimes I forget and I can't find where I am. But it's having a net there. I know that it's there. I know the music is there. And the worst thing that can happen is that for a few minutes, a few seconds, I don't know where I am. But then I know where I am. And the main thing that I think that I took from that is that I was really being influenced by how I thought people were going to look at me, how they were going to be impressed or not impressed by me. And when I thought about it, the main thing that I want to do is to play this music as well as I possibly can. And the best way that I can play it is by having an iPad there. And I think that probably that is true, that can translate in so many different walks of life, that if you think a little bit less about how people might judge you and a little bit more about what you need to achieve what you want to achieve.
And maybe also what you need to achieve, what they might expect from you.
Right. Yes. Or even if you kind of take away the expectations and you're just like, I mean, as an artist, you're thinking about your vision and how best to put your vision across. I think it's hard to think about the people listening or the people watching. Like, you can't control them and how they're going to react to you. But what you can try to control is how well you do it according to your own system of evaluating yourself. And for me, I achieve that so much more of the time now that I am using the iPad. And I think that that's probably true for other people if they, I don't know what the equivalent would be, but everybody has something that they're afraid to do.
It's true.
Which probably would make their life easier.
A lot easier. What do you most greatly attribute to your success, do you think?
I think maybe it is, and it's hard to say this, but I think that I have always believed in myself, even when I've been depressed or didn't like how I was playing or who I was at that moment or whatever. I think I have always had enough belief in what I am doing that it carries me through the rough times. And I always pick myself up, even though I might hit a real low. I don't know if everybody has that. I think some people don't have that. And I, for whatever reason, have had that from when I was a very young person.
Yeah, some people just have that.
Yeah.
I don't know how you facilitate. What do you do? But maybe just knowing. I know for me, I know there are moments in my life, it didn't happen very often, but doing something just seemed like I had to jump over the Grand Canyon. I knew I couldn't, but I knew that I must. And it's not so much that I had the confidence I could do it, but I knew that if I wanted to live the life I wanted to live and be true to myself, I had to do it.
Yes, that's well said.
So I know that, you knew that this was something that was for you, playing music. At what points did you understand that you could make a living off of this, or more than that? And how did that come about? And was there intentionality to that? Was there serendipity to that? At what moment do you feel that those two things married?
I mean, honestly, I really meant it when I said from when I was 9, I knew that this is what I wanted to do with my life. Like, I didn't understand how I was going to do it, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I think I was very fortunate in that my husband, as I said, I got married when I was 20, and my husband he was at the time a journalist, and he earned a living. He had a job. So he helped. And I also had a private patron who had helped me from when I was 13. So she had paid for me to go to London. So I was incredibly fortunate to have this because my parents couldn't afford to do any of this. But I had to earn money, and I had to figure out how to earn money because it wasn't enough for my husband to just take care of me. And it wasn't like he was rich. So I first earned money by teaching. I literally put my sign up in the window of the local newsagent and got students in London, and that's what I did. And then when we moved back to Brooklyn, I always had students, children and amateur adults, and that was like my steady work. And I was paid for performances, but not well. I mean, really not well. And it was really, it was almost a fluke how my career changed, because I released an album, my first album, which is of the Goldberg Variations, and through all, that's a whole other story, but that album did incredibly well. And because it did well, then these concert promoters and I I got a manager who helped me then to get concert promoters who were doing major concert series all around the world to start hiring me to play concerts. Now, when you get hired to play concerts on that level, you're paid thousands of dollars for a concert. And so it goes from you getting, $250 to play a recital to thousands of dollars to play a recital. And I didn't know it just stumbled upon that. Like, I didn't know that that's what was going to happen, or that that's how people are paid. And I have a fantastic career, and then there are people that have way better careers than me that are paid way more than I am. So there are lots of different tiers of this. For most musicians, they might get a few concerts like that, but most of their concerts are going to be, more on like the $500 to $1,500 range as a classical artist. And they have to do many of them in order to be able to get to put together their life. And they can't count on that happening. So they also need to have some kind of other steady thing that they're doing, such as teaching or playing in an orchestra. I mean, for instrumentalists that can be in an orchestra, that can be a tremendous job because it has security, it has benefits, it has, you can get health benefits. I get my health benefits from my husband because he's a public school teacher now. So I don't need to think about that. My son is an actor, and he lives in London. My husband's English, so he has dual citizenship. So he doesn't have to worry about health insurance because in England you have the national health. So artists in England have a completely different life
in Europe,
because they
generally
don't need to worry about that. Whereas artists here, they need to think, how are they going to get their health insurance, which really influences choices that are made. Yeah. The recording industry for classical music there's no money in it at all. Like I can have millions of streams of my albums and I will get, a few $100s. I mean, it's really, the streaming has destroyed it for us. So I see the recording as a way of reaching an audience and sharing the music. And also for the concert promoters, it gives them a chance to know who I am. So then they hire me. But all of my income comes from performing. Selling merch is not something that I really have ever done that successfully. I mean, I sell CDs after concerts, but now many people don't even have CD players. I have some vinyl that I sell, but
it's people who like to collect things buy those things still. But
that's a minimal amount. I mean, I earn hardly anything by doing that. So really, for me, my income is almost entirely from performing. I also teach. And I could do that more if I wanted to, and then that would be another source of income for me. But I think that for most musicians who are not pianists, because there are only like one piano in an orchestra, so that's not really a route to be in an orchestra. I think being in an orchestra is a great choice. And I also think that having a job teaching, whether or not it's in higher education or in high school or lower elementary school, I mean, that can be a great way of having some kind of steady work that supports you in all the other projects that you want to do.
Do you have a favorite venue that you've performed in?
I have a few. I mean, I have to say Carnegie Hall is like a dream. Absolute dream to play there.
Is there a particular room in Carnegie Hall?
The big Stern Auditorium. Yeah, it's just magic. And there's a beautiful concert hall in London that I love called the Wigmore Hall, which is like a jewel box. It's incredibly beautiful. I mean, there are all different halls all over the place that are so special.
Have you ever had to pinch yourself when you're doing something? Like, wow, am I really here?
Oh, yes, definitely. I had actually had an experience at Carnegie Hall that was like that. I, for many years, have really been a huge fan of the opera singer Renee Fleming, and I actually performed with her at Carnegie Hall, and accompanied her on songs, and it was just like I was like, how am I doing this? I don't know. How am I on the stage with her doing this in
There's
front of
probably
a sold out audience?
people who feel that way about you. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. That was quite something.
So I know you've had your own path, and everyone's path, I do believe, at a certain level is unique to them. And so that only by being them could they have had that path. But if you could advise anyone who is pursuing making a living in the classical field, what would you advise?
Well, firstly, I think that being a classical musician is very difficult. And I don't think you should do it unless you really can't imagine doing anything else. Honestly, I wouldn't want to win anybody over into becoming a classical musician. Like, you have to have a little bit of a death wish to want to do it.
You gave up the dream of race car driving, and you decided instead to become.
I also advise my students when they're going out into the world, when they graduate, that if they really want to be a musician, that the most important thing is to be a musician, not to be a soloist, or not to think about it as being one specific kind of thing. That basically you should take all the work you can get doing anything that has to do with music. And when I was in my 20s, I played collaboratively with, like, I would accompany other musicians who would hire me to play with them. I would play with choirs. I would play in dance classes. I taught children in the neighborhood to make money. I would do gigs. I would do anything that happened. Anything that was offered to me, I said yes. I said yes to everything. And there were things that I didn't get paid for that were opportunities, like to do recordings where I worked with older artists who shamelessly took advantage of me by not paying me. But I learned a lot by doing that, and I had the experience of learning how to record. Or I tried to do everything I could. I just said yes, and I think that that's important. And if you really want a life in music, and you want that to be how you survive, like that's what you are living on, then you kind of have to do that. You have to figure out a way that you're going to piece everything together to earn your living. I have a very unusual life for the past, 20 years or whatever that I've been doing this, in that I'm in a track where I'm actually paid well to perform. That's a very, very, very privileged place to be. And I didn't even know that this was possible when I was in my 20s. Like, I didn't know that people were paid this to play a concert, And so I am very, very grateful that I have this opportunity to live the way that I do from performing. But I think that you can be happy in so many different ways being a musician. On the other hand, I also think that some people would be happier not earning their living by playing music. I think some people would be artistically more fulfilled if they had a completely different job and they weren't relying on music and earning money from music to give them their happiness. I think that there are some people that the pleasure in making music is taken away by having to do session work and play in an orchestra if they don't want to play in an orchestra, or do things like that, which they find anti-musical. So I think everybody has to make that decision for themselves. Do they want to go through the grind of sometimes kind of polluting their art in order to earn the money doing it? Or do they want to save that art for something precious that is not linked to making money and earning a living? There's different ways of looking at it.
I think that can be transliterated into any art form. So I think
Yes.
that's fantastic advice.
Yeah.
Really. So if we're going to reference music, whether it's classical or pop, try to get work and expose yourself to as many situations as possible, because also you you never know what opportunity will be in that. And I think we were referencing that off camera a little earlier, that you, just like when you come across a person, you just never know who they are, and you should always be respectful. And sometimes when we're younger, we don't necessarily understand that. But I think that opportunities we can direct ourselves toward opportunities, but we also need to be open to getting out there and interfacing with as many people as we can, and sharpening the knife of our craft as often as we can, right?
Yes, that's true.
What do you think, and it can be, and it's obviously a very personal, maybe authentic moment that happens where we're drawn to something, but if you could explain what you feel the value is of the classical aesthetic, how would you explain that?
I mean, first of all, we are using this term classical, and that covers, hundreds of years of basically European art music. That's what it is. It starts off as like liturgical music, and then gradually becomes music that's linked to poetry, that's romanticized, that starts to be played in concert halls. It starts off as something sacred and then turns into something that is a performance. I mean, Bach's music, a lot of the music is written really for the person playing it. They wouldn't have been playing it in a concert hall. There were no concert halls then. So our whole idea of using this one term to cover something that is so broad, people who don't or not familiar with so-called classical music might say, "Oh, it calms them to listen to it." I never understand that, because there's so much music that's classical that I find full of angst, and
Totally.
and really, I would not be able to fall asleep listening to it.
You may not want to listen to it on a rainy day.
Yeah. I think that it's like talking about classic literature. Why do we read Jane Austen or Charles Dickens or Thomas Hardy? I'm just listening. I'm listening to these English authors, but there's so many different authors that one could read from the past. It's something about, first, apart from the actual beauty and intricacy of the music itself, which is endlessly fascinating. If you really start listening to it carefully, there's so many layers to classical music. But there's a kind of link to human beings from another period of time that is profoundly reassuring and inspiring. You think about hearing music that Mozart wrote in Vienna in 1789, and he's experiencing some kind of terrible suffering that you can hear in the music. And here in Brooklyn in 2025, you feel that you can hear and you can relate to that.
We have time travel.
Yeah. It's really amazing, going to see a Shakespeare play, and you think he knew what people were like. And those people were living a totally different life than we are living now. But there's something that we have in common with them that has stayed with us. And that is, it's like trying to make sense of the world. And when you want to make sense of the world, you look backwards and you look forwards and you look in your present moment. And it all comes together when you're playing a piece of music or listening to a piece of music that was written in a different period of time but is speaking to you now.
Simona, I want to thank you so much for coming here and being with us and sharing everything in such a heartfelt way.
Thank you so much. It was really great talking with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Artists Unveiled. Please check us out on Instagram at dimi.app.og, that's dimi.app.og, and on our website at godimi.com.